we get experimental. SciAnts. We're curious, non-judgmental.
This is a phronima. It is transparent, is a deep sea parasite. It looks very much like a plankton. What it does is it pops into other creatures, eats them from the inside out, then uses their bodies to swim through the ocean and lays its eggs in its carcass. Yeah, it's horrifying. They feast by shredding the soft tissue with their sharp claws. They go into these animals, they cut them open with their claws, they eat them, and they use their bodies for different purposes. They use the carcass for a little home. So you can see inside of this gelatinous shell of a jellyfish, there is this parasitic creature that's using it to float and swim around in. Parasitic organs have been as long as predation has existed. So as far back as fossil evidence goes that can answer that question, Tommy, the issue is fossil evidence tends not to tell you if it's a parasite or not, right? Like there's no way to tell if you're just looking in the geological data, even in our amber samples, right, to confirm that it is in fact a parasitic organism. With our parasitic insects, you know, you can look in the amber and say, well, modern day parasites look like this. So maybe that's what they are, but it's extremely difficult to tell that. There is a really good video that's called the Red Queen Hypothesis. And it's the idea that it's primarily applied to host-parasite relationships. But what's really nice about it is that you can apply it to evolution as well, meaning that a host and a parasite are in a constant evolutionary arms race. The moment that the host evolves a better defense mechanism, right behind it, the parasite is evolving a way to counter that defense mechanism. And so what you end up getting is that neither host nor parasite end up really moving forward. They're just at a standstill, racing against each other. Because you can imagine if the host gets away in terms of evolution and of defenses, then the parasite might be dead forever because it'll have nothing to survive with. If the parasite gets ahead, it'll kill off all of the hosts, and it actually will also end up presumably dying at the end. So it's a balancing act. And so that's how parasitism may work as well. It's that back and forth battle of the parasite can take over a little bit better, and then it's the host, and it's the parasite, and eventually no one ends up winning because they're both undergoing constant selection pressures and evolution. All right, let's get back to these crazy parasites that take over the bodies of their hosts and use the dead bodies to move around and cause chaos, chat. The parasite is right here, and it's encased in this, well, essentially barrel-like container. And that's its prey that it ended up eating. And so then it's in this hollowed out shell of a carcass and swimming around in it. See how this barrel has changed colors moving through the ocean as it's darkened up now? That's where they've laid the embryos. So this isn't going to be eaten by potential predators. Instead, it's a good protection for not only the adults, but only their babies, also their babies as well. Here they've put on these particles intentionally on the dish itself. And as it's illuminated, you can actually see how the animals are swimming around based on the displacement of these particles. It's not just in this kind of experiment you can do that in, but any kind of experiment you want to do where the organism is swimming and you're trying to track how that swimming occurs. Inside of this meal, like that's eaten out, this prey, it's climbed inside of it and now it's using that for protection. And there it is again in like a real life image, not just the 3D scan, but you can see there's the parasite inside, and it's inside of something that it's eaten. Quite rare to be able to see, and part of that is because they're primarily deep sea creatures. And so because they're so deep sea, it's hard to study them, because to get them to do their natural behaviors, something that far deep underwater tends not to be easy to demonstrate. And so that's one of the difficulties of it. But the nice thing about that last lab was they're adapting these technologies to be able to work in the deep sea with these animals, so that it's in their natural environment and not something like totally contrived. It's not even a movie, Ubi. It's just a scary nature, possibly. Maybe, sometimes. It is, and Sparky, what I find it really neat is that this animal continues to grow. So it's not a one-off, it finds its home, and that's that. But rather, it digs through and has to find multiple hosts as it ages and gets bigger. So it doesn't just do this once. It does this freaky stuff a lot. Yeah, it needs a bigger host each time, Sparky. So we've talked about how some insects are set at a particular size, like forever, and others shed their exoskeleton. So this is a close relative to insects that, again, has that shedding of the exoskeleton. Kind of like how lobsters shed the exoskeleton too, right? And like each shedding, the animal gets bigger and bigger. So same thing that ends up happening with these organisms as well. Or yeah, like you said, like the hermit crab changing its shell, except this shell is a dead body. because again, they burrow into also relatively really small organisms. So not very big really in size, but don't let that make them less scary, right? I think they're quite horrifying in what they end up doing. Yeah, so then one interesting thing too, Sparky, is they have brood care. So this is actually pretty rare in insects and insects relatives, of them taking care of their embryos. Normally it's just they have embryos and they just kind of ignore them and move on. Like they'll either release egg and sperm into the ocean and then it just flutters in the ocean waves and it just will get lost in the ocean. That's that. Or, you know, maybe they'll release fertilized egg and sperm at the same location and then swim away. But these actually take care of their developing embryos, which is not commonplace. This animal is doing all the maternal care that she can for all the organisms there, like all of its babies. So those are phronima, the scary plankton of the night that I think are quite terrifying. But I thought it would be a fun one to chat about. We don't know much about them in terms of their molecular biology and what the genetics are at play and why they do these kinds of behaviors ends up existing, right? And it's, yeah, I think it's super neat.